This conference will now be recorded.
Leanne, this is Matt. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
No.
I've never had a problem with the camera. I don't know. I keep clicking it on and it's not. I'm just.
I have the same
Jennifer on?
situation.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if I'm having this with Russell and whether it's on the ACUS end rather than my end.
Yours is showing up different, Matt. It's showing like when you click on the camera, it's showing like a no camera. In
Yeah,
a way
I
that
don't.
Russell's is not. So I'm guessing that there's something different going on, but I'm not sure.
Matt, I'm looking into it right now. This is Jennifer.
There's something that says share my webcam now. I don't know. But whatever, I guess if it doesn't work.
Russell, we can see you now.
Stay happy anyway.
I am. Leanne, do you want to hold off for a couple minutes or should we?
You know, we're only missing 2 people who RSVP'd, so, and they will probably show up in the middle of roll call, so I feel like we can get started if everyone's ready.
Yeah, this is Matt. Just one thing. Reeve, if Reeve joins the meeting, it will be late. He's working on the recommendation on artificial intelligence for a committee meeting on Monday, and we agreed that I'd get on this call and he'd deal with artificial intelligence, which was, I thought, a pretty good trade. So.
Great. Okay. So to get things started, I'm going to do a quick roll call. And if you could unmute yourself and turn on your camera when I call your name and say here, just so we do a quick check that everybody's technology is working, that would be great. So Nadine, I see that you are here. Kent Barnett.
I'm here.
Jack Bierman.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Eric Benderson. Michael Cole.
Here.
Anika Cooper. I saw her. She may be having technical difficulties in coming back.
I saw her too. Yeah,
Okay.
there.
Oh, there she is. Anika Cooper. David Engstrom.
I am here, but I'm having camera issues.
Seems to be a theme today, but we can hear you. Janice Hoffman. I see that Janice Hoffman is here, but looks muted.
Mhm.
We will come back. Okay. Jeffrey Lubbers.
I'm here.
Alexander Manuel.
Here.
Thomas McCarthy. Roxanne Rothschild.
She's here. I saw her.
I'm here.
Great. Michael Walsh. Russell Wheeler.
I'm here.
Joseph Salome. William Funk.
Here.
Are there any members of ACUS who I did not call who are on the line?
Hi, Janice Hoffman is here. I had a little technical trouble during the roll call.
Great, we can hear you now though.
Great.
Okay. So with that, I will turn it over to Matt for some opening remarks.
I have none, other than to thank everyone for joining on a Friday afternoon during this election. And I'll just turn it back over to you, and with the hope that we can, or turn it up, I don't know, back over to Leanne or Nadine, with the hope that maybe we can finish this before, I don't know, 4:30?
Cocktail hour. I was
Cocktail
thinking
hour,
a week
if you will.
cocktail hour, which could be at like 3:30 or 4, given the week we've all had. So
There are a lot of distractions.
yes, quite a few. So yeah, I'll just echo what Matt said. I think we're in good shape, and hopefully we can call for a vote before we need to take a break. That would be great. Leanne, did you have anything you wanted to add before we dive in? Okay, great. So the last time we met, we spent some time going through the preamble. I hope that you've had an opportunity to look at the changes that were made in response to our discussion then. I personally think it looks great. If there's any specific comments, I'd like to just take up preamble as one big block before we return to the recommendations. If you have a specific comment or question or a line you want to point us to. But I feel like we spent some good time on that last time and made good progress, and that the responsive edits were well done here. So thank you, Leanne and Gavin, Matt and Reeve. Any comments? If you have them, please speak up, wave, comment, chat.
Hi.
Jack,
yeah. I have a few suggestions on the preamble, and I think this, by the way, I think this whole thing is great, both the preamble and the recommendations. But I had a few. They're sort of small editing things. So and I'm going off the redlined one. I think most of them are simple enough. I don't even need to give you anything in writing because in the chat. But in line 6 of the redlined ones, I don't really like the word indicated in that line. I would suggest either saying, as the administrative conference has previously explained, or else I would just take out that whole first clause and just put litigants, their lawyers, and other members of the public benefit. And it's got the footnote to the ACUS reports on this. So whichever the group prefers, I just think the word indicated is an odd word in that context. But I don't know what people think about that. Do you want me to stop on each one, or? Because I have.
Jack, I actually had circled that on my draft and thought, well, let's just see where things go. I think it could come out completely, that clause, or if we want to give the conference some props right at the start, observed, recommended, explained, any of those words that are a little stronger.
Observed is better. Observed is better than explained. How about observed?
Sure.
People agree with that? Okay. On line 14 of the preamble, this is one of my little pet things. I would change the or to an and.
Could you read the sentence? Because I have the unredlined version, so the line numbers are going to be different.
And promotes an understanding of adjudicators' constitutional status under the Appointments Clause and other constitutional provisions. I would say rather than or. That's a time.
Line 9.
It's line 9 of the non-red line, I guess. I don't have the. I'm looking at the red line.
We got it.
Okay, then in the next line, I would say I would change the word where it says agencies may also benefit from disclosures about agency adjudicators. I would, instead of because, I would say by, and then I would take out it and allows. I say by allowing them to compare their own practices. Keep it active. What do people think about that? Is that an improvement?
Yes.
Okay, so then in the next, the sentence where it says the officials addressed by this recommendation are those who preside, this seems to be a little bit important. And I was just confused. I circled the phrase or that are not so governed but are legally required by statute regulation. I just wasn't sure required to do what. It didn't say, I don't think it tells us what they're required to do. Or I'm sorry, that are not so governed. Governed to do what? I wasn't legally required. I just didn't understand that.
It's the hearings that are governed, or not so governed. It is a little awkward, but
yeah.
Not so.
You can solve that on line 16 by just putting hearings after or.
Yeah, okay, that would be, yeah, okay, now I understand it. Yeah, that's the right way to do it. Just put the word hearings after or.
You take out legal, the statute is legal.
But are legally required to do, but is it legally required? Do we want to say that they're formal, or do we not care about them being formal still?
Jack, can I just jump in here? This is intended. I had originally drafted the sentence, so I will take the blame for the poor drafting here. But this is intended to This is intended, and maybe it's not phrased correctly, but it's intended to track prior ACUS recommendations on adjudication. That incorporate the concept of what Michael Asimov calls type B adjudications. That is adjudications in which the hearing is required, in which a hearing is required by statute, regulation, or executive order. That's what's intended here, and that is consistent with any number of prior recommendations. In fact, the prior disclosure recommendations do basically limit themselves to either what Asimov calls type A or type B.
Okay, so I'm not going to get into my whole and versus or thing because I think either one is fine here, but I guess adding the word hearing does it well enough. With that explanation. But it seems like you have to be somewhat more educated than usual to understand that part of the preamble.
What if you say, or hearings that are not governed by those provisions, but are, get rid of the not so governed? Is that the part giving you a little pain there, Jack?
That doesn't, I think that the not so governed doesn't bother me.
It's a little more parallel is all I was thinking. Preside
Okay.
over hearings that are governed by the APA or hearings that are not governed by those provisions, but
Yeah, well, that's fine with me. I think my problem is solved just by adding the word hearing.
okay.
Hearings. And then if you want to change that other wording, that I don't have any
Okay.
problem with that at all.
Russell, did you wanted legally out?
Well, I just think it's unnecessary. I mean, I assume the statutes are legal.
Would it be helpful
Yeah,
to add a 1 and a 2 in this sentence? Are those one who preside over hearings, or no, over hearings, 1 that are governed by, or 2 that are not so governed by?
Yeah.
Seems like we've got two different things where we have 1 and a 2 here. We've got two different officials and 2 different hearings in this sentence. Maybe we should break it up into a couple sentences.
or use an and. You know, that's why I'm always sticky on and or. I think you want to put and then.
Between the numbers? Between
Yeah, because
one.
now you don't want to, we're not saying choose which, we're saying both. Right?
Should the number 1 go after the word hearings and then we take out, I know we just went over the hearings, but if we use the numbers, it seems like hearings should go before the numbers since it would apply to both 1 and 2.
I think it works better this way.
Okay.
Just because we want to have in number 2 the fact that they're not governed by the APA.
Is there a way to look at that line without the markup just so that we could just read it clean to see quickly the flow?
Is it possible?
Give me one.
I'm sorry. Is it
Yeah.
possible in number 2 to just say non-APA hearings? Hearings that are governed by the formal hearing provisions of the APA and non-APA hearings governed by other statutes, regulations.
I think that does not work for Alex, I think that doesn't work for 2 reasons. One is, then you got to deal with the last sentence, but the prior ACUS, that opens up the universe to every adjudication in the federal government, and ACUS has tried to limit these things to hearings of some level of formality. So I think that would be the concern. The other thing is non-APA hearings would have to be defined because, as you've pointed out, and others, of course, every hearing is probably governed by at least some provisions of the APA.
Does it make sense to say section 555 of the APA for those kinds of hearings? So it would either be under 554, 555, 556, or 557.
The only problem is, I guess it depends what I guess it depends. I mean, are you talking about getting rid of like required by statute, regulation, or executive order? Because that's very well entrenched in ACUS recommendations. And I don't think that this is going to cohere very well with at least 3 or 4 recommendations if that's taken out. I mean, that's very central to ACUS recommendation, among others, 2016-4.
I see. Yeah.
No, and I guess I just want to echo Matt's concerns about how we phrase it and how we're trying to track somewhat what we did with Professor Asimov's report, where without having to label it type A, type B, type C, if he were here, he would be asking us to do that.
Nadine, the other recommendation is, I forget the number, but we have a recommendation on adjudication materials on agency websites, and we have one on adjudication rules on agency websites, and both of them, I think, refer specifically to these 2 categories of adjudications. That would be my concern.
Yeah, we want to be consistent. Absolutely. To go back to Jack, who was concerned just about kind of the phrasing. Are you comfortable with the phrasing now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that basically Matt has explained why it's impossible to say more about these hearings, because we're talking about sort of relatively formal hearings that are kind of sort of similar to APA hearings, but not all the way. and not the totally informal stuff that's only governed by 555E, but there's no really way to say that, I guess. It's kind of, am I correct? Is that correct in what you're saying, Matt?
Well, I think if you said, yeah, I think so. I mean, part of this is to not be overly expansive, not to include every adjudication, but to include only ASIMO A's and B's, with the caveat in the last sentence of the paragraph that other agencies that conduct, say, what ASIMO calls type Cs may also benefit from the recommendation.
What about putting the word similar before hearings in number 2?
No, it's up to the committee. My only concern is we're potentially creating confusion with other recommendations that this may just not cohere.
Okay, that's fine with me.
I don't know, but it's up to the committee. I just want to point out, what I just want the committee to know is that this language, except for some of the syntax and so forth, is drawn pretty directly from prior ACUS recommendations.
Yes. I think similar could confuse. It might clarify for you, Jack, but I think that could,
okay.
We're just talking about 2 categories of hearings. We're not really characterizing their characteristics, if that makes sense. Like double, it's Friday, I'm sorry.
Okay. And then then we have the residual clause in the last sentence through which you could drive a truck, any agency, now we've included everything under the sun here potentially.
Right. Okay, fine. Yeah, so I have 3 more little things in the preamble. So
okay.
Near the in the sentence about ALJs make after the sentence may make up only a small portion of federal adjudicators. There's a clause that says agency specific policies that take any number of forms. I just don't, any number seems a little too informal to me. So I would just change it to that take a variety of forms or various forms, either one, whichever. I would use the word variety. Is that good?
Works for me. Anybody?
Can we take out the word? Can we take out the word only? It kind of diminishes
in the first line, Leanne. First line.
Yeah. Yes.
In that paragraph as well, do you really need the first sentence? Doesn't the second sentence say the same thing? Make up a small portion of federal adjudicators. There are many more AJs than there are ALJs. It says the same thing, doesn't it?
It kind of flows from the sentence before.
I like it. I mean.
That's fine.
Doesn't matter to me.
At the bottom, though, there's a reference on page 4 to the Freedom of Information Act. It leaves the inference that the Freedom of Information Act applies only to information on websites. I moved that sentence on page 4. It's at page 4. Well, in the clean version, lines 59, 60. Couldn't that go after incentives at note 12?
We got way past where we were already.
Yeah, well, we'll go back, Jack. Let's, I think we're in that paragraph and Russell has a suggestion for moving this
Moving
line.
the reference to the Freedom of Information Act, which applies not only to website disclosure, but to pretty much anything. Just moving that to this paragraph that's more generally about sources before we get to what should be available on the website necessarily.
Were you thinking at the end of that paragraph or after?
Yeah, after incentive. I would say something like, and of course, the administrative conference also recognized some agency policies may qualify blah, blah, blah under the Freedom of Information Act. So, and that's in a paragraph of what goes on the website. But why not just put that in this more general paragraph that we're talking about now?
Any comments?
Seems sensible.
Yeah. So if I can, I just have two more little things.
Two more.
If
Okay.
you don't mind. So in this, there's a sentence, many types of information about AJs are available in these sources, but they may be difficult to find, particularly when located in the Code of Federal Regulations. I would put only after the word located, particularly when located only in the Code of Federal Regulations or the Federal Register. That's the point, because they could be there too, and also on the websites. That's just a simple little.
Yeah.
You could move
Sorry.
the only,
You
but
want
I
the
check
word
out and put it
three.
Yeah, take the only from before, right, and put it over here.
in. Yeah.
When after the word located, not before? I'm not sure it matters.
Yeah, no, if you put only before located, then I'll give you a whole lecture about my second pet peeve. That's different from the and or problem. It's the wrong placement of the word only.
Fair enough.
Okay?
We'll have to do a meeting just on those, Jack, someday.
Yeah, okay. So now in the
Okay.
last sentence of the preamble, obviously, I understand the thought, but agencies aren't going to tailor their recommendation. They're going to tailor their reactions to the recommendations. So I would say, I would rewrite that sentence as follows. Given their unique circumstances, comma, agencies will have to tailor their reactions to this recommendation so that they can present information in the clearest and most accessible way permissible that is consistent with law and policy.
Instead of reaction, can you say policies?
No, it's their reactions to this recommendation. I mean, unless you just don't want to mention this recommendation because it's not their policy. No, we're not. No, that's not the same thought.
Is it implementation of this recommendation?
Yes.
See, that was initially my thought, but then we're sort of isn't that a little presumptuous of that they're all going to jump to implement the recommendation?
Yes.
That's why I thought
We want
reaction.
to. We want to be presumptuous, don't we?
Yeah, that's fine with me. I thought that was a little too presumptuous for us, but
They won't have
that's
to
fine.
tailor it if they don't implement it.
Yeah.
That's fine. I just was trying to be a little more modest than that.
I like that with the unique circumstances at the front, though. That works, Jack.
Okay, that's me on the preamble. Thank you. I have only a couple of little tiny ones in the recommendation too, but obviously there may be
Great.
other stuff to do.
Anything, Russell? Yeah.
Yeah, this is Russell. I have a lot of little things that probably I can save everybody's time by just sending them to, sending them in. I don't think they're substantive, but I'll do that. I do have one comment on the first page at line 7, where it says the availability of these policies and practices allows the public, among other things, to assess the impartiality of it doesn't allow them to assess their impartiality. It allows them to assess mechanisms that promote impartiality. Just because you know the mechanisms there doesn't mean you know that the adjudicator is necessarily impartial. I mean, the parallel, the world I live in, the federal courts, just because I know federal judges have life tenure, that doesn't tell me that every one of them is impartial all the time. That just tells me there's a mechanism in place to promote their impartiality.
Trying to think if there's a different word that would work instead of assess.
Well, I'm just using the word to allows the interested public to be familiar with the mechanisms or to know about it. I'm just using the word that's in the text now, that's all.
Any thoughts?
Maybe it's the word allows rather than makes it easier for the public to.
That's not my concern. My concern is the statement that if you know about the policy, then you know that whether the adjudicator is impartial. Just knowing one doesn't tell you the other.
thought that the policy is intended to promote impartiality.
Well, that's fine. That's the kind of thought. And it does say promote below. I gave you my words. My main point is just not to have ACUS say that as long as you know what these policies are, then you, by knowing that, you know that these adjudicators are impartial. You may know they're impartial for a variety of reasons, but not just because you know what the policies are. Policies don't ensure impartiality.
I think Russell is right, Nadine. The only problem with this phrasing now is, first of all, the policies may not promote impartiality, and they may not be designed to promote impartiality. They may bear on the question of impartiality, but they're not promotional in that respect. Not all of them, at least. Some are. An impartiality regulation, presumably, is designed to promote impartiality. The mechanism of how you're appointed under a statute is not a policy that promotes impartiality. So the phrasing needs to be adjusted here somehow.
Well, it's intended to meet the impartiality requirement. I mean, I sort of see impartiality as a requirement, and the policies are intended to meet that requirement in some way.
But if this recommendation is dealing with a whole bunch of categories of information, like how Congress has set up, how an adjudicator is being compensated, a compensation scheme set up by Congress is not intended to promote impartiality. It may bear on the question of impartiality, how someone's compensated, but it's not impartiality promoting, I don't think.
But conflict of interest rules, for instance, would be.
But this recommendation deals more with things other than recusal rules, impartiality regulations. It's much broader in its scope. So this framing sentence, I think, has to account for the categories of information that the recommendation is addressing, and I don't think that promote the impartiality does that.
That relate to the impartiality?
This is Ken. What about something like to assess matters that may affect impartiality or that may implicate?
Yeah, I just sent a chat. I don't know what people think about the language I just sent. Facilitates public scrutiny of practices related to the impartiality of administrative adjudicators. Public oversight, if you want to do a less loaded term.
Education. Facilitates. Oh. I think that's better. I think that's getting closer to what we're trying to say here. So the availability of policies facilitate and promote, because the second clause is going to be promoting and understanding, right? So maybe we're promoting and understanding as to both subjects. I don't know. Maybe I'm back to where we were. I understand Russell's concern that we're not trying to suggest that the public is going to learn in depth about whether their adjudicator is impartial or not, but they are going to learn how the agency is monitoring that or.
Correct. That's my point.
What was Ken's language? I mean, these things, the idea is that there's an indicia of impartiality, but I think the idea of having, saying that they promote is not, they may not promote, they may do just the opposite.
Well, maybe related is the best kind of mush word there. I think Jack and Jeff both suggested related.
I think that's fine. Anything gets us away from what we were before.
Allows the public, among other things, to, I think Jack is suggesting, facilitate. I don't know if we need to repeat public there.
Policies
But
and practices.
can everybody see the chat? I can read it if that's helpful.
Yeah, I can see it.
Allows the
Nadine,
public
can
to.
we avoid, this is just per ACUS policy. If we could avoid substantive comments in the chat, that would be preferred because it kind of defeats transparency to the public when
Okay.
these
Yeah.
offline comments are being, it's like a sidebar.
Would it be better or more in line with what the committee is trying to do? This is Judge Sullivan, excuse me.
Thank you.
To say the availability of these policies and practices helps educate the public, among other things, about the agency's commitment to the impartiality of its administrative adjudicators. Something to that effect.
I think that sounds great. And you may have to repeat it so we can capture it.
Judge Sullivan, one thing you just may want to, I think that I agree with Nadine. You got to just, it's not just the agency's commitment, because some of these policies will have been established by Congress, as in the case of ALJs.
Okay. Let me see if I can remember what I just said. The availability allows.
Can we rewind the tape?
It basically, what I'm trying to get to is the availability of these policies and practices helps educate the public, among other things. About, and we could say Congress's and the agency's commitment to ensuring the impartiality of administrative adjudicators.
Okay.
And that gives you really a positive message about the agencies and what they're trying to do.
I think that's fine.
Nadine, I'm not a member of the committee. I do want to raise the possibility the council may push back on this. It's a little at variance with how the project was conceived, but that's fine if the committee wants that's the language the committee. I just want you to be aware of the risk that the council might offer an amendment there.
The concern, how does it go beyond?
I guess the agency's commitment to ensuring.
Okay, all right.
That would be the language that would be flagged, I think. But I mean, it's fine. It's the committee's decision. Just don't, if you see a council amendment, don't be shocked on this one.
This is Judge Sullivan. I have a question about that, and you may or may not know. Is it because it basically tags the agencies into having a commitment that they don't want to expressly commit to? I mean, what would be the general objection?
I think you probably have stated it reasonably well. I think the council's view is that that the agency should put the material out there so the public can assess things relating to impartiality, but that ACUS was not going to take a position in any way as to, what impartiality means exactly, how far agencies should go by way of impartiality, all those sort of things.
Okay, thank you. Would it make a difference if the words "and the agencies" end quote were stricken, so it's limited only to Congress?
I don't think that would make a difference, and that would, I think, run into the problem that a lot of these policies are set by the agencies.
Yeah.
This whole discussion leads me back to preferring the language just about I think the idea of talking educate the public is great, but maybe just about mechanisms related to the impartiality rather than someone's commitment.
Let's try that. That's a little more generic, I think. Mechanisms related to.
Did you
Yeah.
still want insuring, or was insuring out?
I take insuring out.
I would say take
I agree
insurance
with
out.
Russell. Yeah. Okay.
Because I'm in agreement with Russell that it's really about, it's about scrutiny of structural matters. It really doesn't, it's neutral in terms of what they're actually doing.
I think that's better. Matt, any concerns there that we should prepare for? Or is
No,
that
I think
better?
it's safer. I mean, it's safer.
Okay.
If the committee doesn't want to be safe, that's fine, and wants to be a
Well, we
little
want
bit
to be safe.
normative
rather-
about what impartiality, but this is safer, this formulation.
We don't want to be controversial, Matt. Okay. Moving along. Anything else in the preamble? Russell, you said you will pass along your little
Well,
tidbit.
yeah, the little things about antecedents and things like that, which I don't think are substantive, and rather than take up everybody's time to go over that stuff, I just send them in, and the powers that can be, we deal with them as they want.
That's fantastic.
Okay, I'll do that. Won't be today, it'll be Monday, but I'll do that promptly.
Thank you. Anyone else on the preamble, or we're going to move on to the
Well,
recommendation?
I'm gonna make a very trivial suggestion, even though Russell doesn't want to. So in footnote 4, this is Jeff. I don't think we need rehearing on bank denied anymore.
Oh, yeah.
So that should be the most
Sorry,
trivial
what?
suggestion.
That's
that
great.
blue book or
That's all we
maroon
have
book,
to
Jeff?
deal with today. We're in good shape.
I know I'm violating the blue book, but that's okay.
I'm sorry, I missed what your suggestion was.
In footnote 4, take out the words rehearing on bank denied.
Got it.
Okay. Anything further on the preamble? Great. I'm not seeing any. Okay, good. Let's go to the recommendation. Last time we went through 1 and I believe 2. There have been some adjustments there based on our conversation at the last meeting. I think they capture what we discussed. So I'm inclined to move to recommendation 3 and 4.
Can I make a comment on number 1? I mean,
Yes, you were not at our last meeting, right?
okay. Well, I
Right?
don't know. I can't
Go right
remember
ahead.
now.
Yeah, I
But
don't think you were.
1D, the assignment of non-adjudicated duties to adjudicators, especially duties that relate to investigation or prosecution. Well, obviously ALJs are not supposed to have duties that relate to investigation or prosecution. So this could not apply to ALJs, and it probably shouldn't apply to most AJs either. So I'm just wondering if at the beginning we should say the prohibition of assignment or of non-adjudicative duties to adjudicators or something like that, because I don't think any agency is going to want to publicize the fact that their adjudicators have investigative prosecutory duties. So I think that one's somewhat problematic.
So
Jeff,
the
maybe we should-
prohibition. Go ahead, Jack.
I was going to say there are non-adjudicative duties that are not prohibited to be assigned. So maybe what the recommendation should talk about the assignment of non-adjudicative duties, non-prohibited non-adjudicative duties to adjudicators, and leave out. We just say, because it goes without saying that they're following the law on the other ones.
Well, maybe we should just say.
Why don't you just say assignment, if any?
Maybe we should take out especially duties that relate to investigation or prosecution then.
This is Ken. I wouldn't do that, because the concern I would have, based on the survey we did, there are AJs that
Right.
have the ability to investigate or prosecute, and that's exactly what I would want to know if I'm one of the private parties. To me, this is a key portion of the disclosure recommendation. I agree it doesn't apply to ALJs, but it also says above in the preamble portion of 1 that it's as applicable. So either this applies to you or it doesn't, but if you do have AJs that have these other duties, I'd want to know about them.
What if you were to say assignment, where do you put the phrase "if any" after assignment?
Well, it implies that it might be permissible to have these kinds of duties. Otherwise, why would we be telling agencies that they should broadcast it? So, I mean, I think if we're going to say anything about it, we should be negative towards the last clause at least.
Would it help to have both, say the assignment or the prohibition of the assignment of non-adjudicated duties?
Right. This is Kent again. I agree with Jeff's point. I think they should be prohibited from having these functions, but I thought part of what we were doing here is we weren't supposed to be making these substantive recommendations like we did in the last recommendation and really keeping this as a pure disclosure document. And I don't know of anything that actually prohibits them if it's not under the APA's formal provisions. So I wouldn't recommend doing that here.
But if they're not supposed to do it, then why are we sort of suggesting that they publicize it? I mean, it's almost like saying, especially, agencies should list the illegal activities of adjudicators or something. I mean, we don't want.
No, that would be great. I would like to shame them into this. If you have got your adjudicators doing this, yes, publicize it. Everyone should know you're doing something that is not a good practice. But our portion, I thought, was here not to say what is a good or bad practice. We'll just let disclosure take care of that. Sunlight be the best disinfectant.
But Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong. Kent, also, there's no specific prohibition for assigning investigative or prosecutorial functions to non-ALJ adjudicators, to AJs. And if that's
except to process.
Well, no, I understand that, but that due process is a standard rather than a rule that's specific about that. And so I think that leaving it as is, and as was pointed out, the part in number 1 before the letter says as applicable, and so it's clear that ALJs are not allowed to have any of those. That's clear from the APA. And to the extent that AJs have some of them, it's completely consistent with this recommendation that we would want the agencies to have to disclose that. I mean,
the biggest category, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think from your 2017 study, maybe the most significant category of at least part-time adjudicators were like 700 or 800 enforcement attorneys at the NLRB who are the adjudicators not in unfair labor practice cases, but representation cases.
Yes, I mean, that is true. And I mean, at least for the survey responses we got, aside from kind of that large group of it, there weren't that many groups that could do this, that could both adjudicate and investigate and prosecute. My recollection is it was somewhere around the neighborhood of 20% or so of those that were reported to us. So
how about if we said, especially any duties assigned to AJs that relate to investigation or prosecution?
Jeff, I wouldn't like that because it would imply that it's okay to do it to ALJs. It's even worse than as it's written now, I think, based on your concern.
I'm tempted to take it out since it's causing so much trouble, but I know that that's.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should take the thing out.
I just wonder if it's something that agencies will have. I mean, we're saying policies or practices that are basically committed to writing, although a later recommendation suggests that people think about committing some of these practices to writing if they haven't already. How likely is it that that's going to be in writing?
Has any agency put this in writing so far? I doubt.
Well, that's pretty different because we talk about custom. There are other provisions that talk about enshrining, documenting customs.
I mean, we make clear that we're talking about applicable policies and practices that govern the appointment and oversight. I mean, the list is a long list. What do we lose by taking it out?
I'd like to speak to that, which is, I agree with Kent very much that to the extent that agencies in fact will do this, we certainly want them to be explicit that they do it. We may not like that they do it, but the fact is that it's not prohibited by the APA. It's not prohibited by even the ACUS recommendation with respect to AJs. I don't believe actually came out and said they couldn't do this or shouldn't do this. It was just left out. So I think it's important that this concept be in there, just the way Kent said. When I did my study years ago, EPA had its enforcers, investigators be AJs for the low-level violations. So,
if you want to smoke these things out, why don't we just say the assignment of any non-adjudicative duties to adjudicators, period? And then, you know, if some agencies sort of naively put it out there, I mean,
I like that.
Can I make one other alternative suggestion?
Russell, yes.
Perhaps under recommendation 2 at line, around line 93, to the extent some policies concerning adjudicators may be a matter of custom, such as assignment of non-adjudicative duties, for example, agencies should consider documenting. That makes note of the fact that it may be there, but it doesn't give it the kind of prominence as worrying other people. Now then the question then becomes for Kent whether or not, and I just don't recall, but he will, whether or not instances of adjudicators performing non-adjudicative functions are in every instance dictated by custom as opposed to prescribed policies.
well, I think ALJs sometimes are assigned to hear hearings in formal rulemakings, like at OSHA. So, I mean, that's probably reflected in one of their policies somewhere. But if we just left out that last especially clause, I think we would.
Can we go back up to the list, Leanne? We'll leave that for now on the recommendation 2. So for D, if we left everything
After respect,
especially, yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, there might be some for ALJs, there might be some for AJs, and we'll stay out of this thicket about.
So it's in, and it's just, I mean, the especially part is going to be captured by the first part. So I don't think we need any objection.
Kind of parallel to B, the way B is now. We're not really saying what's the proper place for them in the hierarchy. Just where are they?
Okay.
Do we still want
Right.
the if any clause?
It's okay with me.
Yeah, I think let's leave it in. Any objections? I think that was Russell's suggestion. Okay.
Okay, so now I have 2 other small things on the list.
Okay, and then we have, I see your comment, Bill. William, we'll get to you. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, so the procedure for assigning cases, I think I would just move it up higher in the list, maybe above D, above the current D, because it, you know, it comes earlier in the kind of chronology of things.
And is it one procedure or is it procedure?
Oh, that's okay with me too.
I'm just asking, is procedures more precise?
We have procedures in A. I mean, there's a lot of things listed there, so this is one.
So
the procedure for assigning cases, say procedures for assigning cases. I presume agencies have more than one.
Just procedures. No,
Yeah.
no the.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
So
that was it on the list, Jeff?
the last one is J. I noticed in the Appendix A, one of the things that we suggest be put in there is case processing goals. And so that's a little different from what we have in J now. So I thought maybe we could just add and any case processing goals or something like that, just into J, since that would foreshadow what we have in the appendix model.
So would it come at the end, such as, are you thinking of such?
And case processing goals, if any,
Okay,
after performance.
any thoughts? Okay, great. Back
That's
to
it.
A. Great, thank you, Jeff. Back to A.
Okay, my concern is to, and it may be in 1A or it might be in 2, but I'd like to flag the authority for appointing AJs. I mean, the authority for appointing ALJs is clear, but the authority for appointing AJs is less clear and varies from agency to agency and different kinds of AJs. And this is increasingly becoming an issue in litigation, so that the idea that people should be able to know what's the authority that the agency is using for appointing these AJs should be something that would be worthwhile to have out there in this public document. So whether I would say the procedures and authorities, add and authorities after procedures would do it for me.
I think that's captured by 2. I could be wrong. The way we've revised it, I think this was a concern.
It's just a question of how we could put my flagging of it into. I mean, I agree. So if you wanted to look at 2 now as the alternative way of doing it, that's fine with me too.
I just think it captures the idea of providing authority for the entire list, because I think it refers back, right, if I'm looking at it.
Yeah,
Include the authorities for the policies described in paragraph 1. We could even say enumerated in paragraph 1.
Can we go to 2?
Something like that. Listed. Yeah, let's go to 2. I think, are we done? If we're done with 1, we're going to 2.
Well, I go to 2 as the alternative way of doing it, because as I say, we have under A, federal statutes, including relevant provisions of the APA and other laws applicable to ALJs and AJs. It's so broad that I want to flag that it's the appointment of AJs that we need the authority for, the federal statute. So federal statutes, including relevant provisions of the APA and other laws applicable to ALJs and AJs, including the authority for their appointment, right? I think it's important to flag that we want to see what the authority for the appointment of these people is. ALJs is obvious, but AJs is not.
Well, I think that covers that. I mean, and Kent, do you have any thoughts about the authority that underlies the appointment of AJs? I mean, to the extent that they're not, I'm trying to think.
The only thing I was wondering, as you all were talking about this, is whether you're thinking of authority slightly differently. Nadine, it strikes me you're thinking of like which statute you would turn to, whereas I thought Bill was thinking more about which individual is actually appointing. And I do think that that's useful, especially as we're having more appointments clause challenges, just figuring out who is the person that's actually doing it here. I could see adding that, like Bill was suggesting, if I'm understanding him correctly, to that subsection 1A.
Well, I would say that I was thinking the statute actually, because in the work that I've done, it's been very, very hard to try to figure out. I mean, it's usually clear who actually did the appointment. You can find that fairly easily, but it's not that easy to find out why that person had the authority to appoint them. And to the extent that that many of these AJs, if not all of them, are inferior officers of the United States, there has to be a statute that authorizes their appointment, or it's not constitutional. So the idea of being able to easily find that to avoid legal challenges to it would, I think, be a good thing. I mean, I think identifying who the person was who appointed it, that would be great as well. But my real concern is the statutory authority for it. And as I say, just this general statement about laws relevant to AJs, I don't think that's enough of a flag of what needs to be there.
So the language before the letter A is what we included this in this revised version to try and incorporate that, where we say legal documents should include the authorities for the policies described in paragraph 1. So we are suggesting in the current language that there should be like the statutes that provide authority to do the things listed. But maybe that's insufficiently clear.
Well, I agree that it does include it, all right? And that's why my suggestion of flagging it didn't seem to be changing any policy that was incorporated into this document. But I did think it was important to flag it because I don't think it otherwise stands out as an issue, and I think it should.
What if it's flagged in A to recommendation 2, the list at the end of that list, including or something like that?
Yeah, including the authority for their appointment. That and I'd leave it to the Committee on Style. But it's the idea is just to include the authority for their appointment.
We've got including twice currently, if we put that in. So we might want to work on wording.
You're right. That's why I say I'd leave it to.
I think that a simple clause at the end of 1A would work best to accomplish what Bill is trying to accomplish. The procedure for assessing, selecting, and appointing candidates for adjudicator positions and the legal authority under which the appointments are made.
Then we wouldn't have to lengthen the sentence in number 2 so much.
I agree. Either way.
It seems to me that, and it fits right in with the subject of A.
Well, and you might even want to not limit it to the appointments here. You might want to know what the legal authority is for assessing and selecting the candidates. You could just say, and the legal authorities, and the legal authorities. That's why I said originally the procedures and authorities for assessing, selecting. But
well, I think that legal authority under which the appointments are made, when it says under which, that would include all of the standards governing the appointments. I think it's capacious enough, those words. Fine. I mean, I could be, if others disagree, that's fine, but I think those words cover that.
I'm happy with this solution.
Any objections? And we'll take it out later on in number 2. Okay.
You're going to take out number 2, the language in number 2?
No, just what we added in.
Yeah. The language in number 2, at least it's kind of illustrative. It kind of explains what the authorities could be, statutes, CFR, etc.
No, just the added language, the proposed language. We're definitely leaving 2. No, the language that was proposed is now in 1A. So I don't think we put it here. Okay.
I have a suggestion. Wondering, do folks think that it would be helpful to add in that sort of list of authorities, delegations of authority? I know some agencies have relied upon that, where they will delegate the authority from the person designated in the statute, and sometimes you have to look through the delegations to find that trail of authority. Would that be helpful or not?
On the list?
Yes.
One way of doing that would be just to add a D after the C and say delegations of authority, rather than trying to link it to one of the others, but just add it as another one.
Okay. Great.
So on line 93,
Right.
include the authorities for the policies described in paragraph 1. Well, there won't, some of the policies described in paragraph 1 might not have an authority. I mean, like the
If
placement.
any.
So I would just say any authorities for the policies described.
Great. Are we to your point, Jeff? There's an edit there. I see a comment from Leanne.
It's literally just taking out the word of, I think.
Oh, that's all right.
But I wanted to flag it just in case.
Perfectly fine. Okay. Anything further on 2?
I have one suggestion.
Okay. Russell.
Line 86, the legal documents should include, that almost sounds like a recommendation. Within a recommendation, the legal documents are those that include. I mean, it sounds like we're telling Congress what it should include in its documents. The legal documents are those that include.
Okay. I think we're done with 2.
What about the last sentence? Can we say agencies need not rather than do not need to?
I had something on that sentence, Jeff.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I didn't like the phrasing of that. I understand that, and I had edited that sentence, and also think deep down that it really ought to be number 5 on the list of recommendations. Agencies may choose not to. I would write it as agencies may choose not to provide access to policies covered by a Freedom of Information Act exemption that the agency would invoke, comma, or which are otherwise protected by law. And I'm not sure that that really fits. Does that fit with the rest of number 2? That's the other question I had. I don't want to tell them it's do not need to. I think may choose not to, and that leaves them the choice. They may also choose to, because they're not required to invoke it. And then, and instead of saying intends to invoke, I would just say would invoke, because they may not have any actual intent if they, they've never thought about a Freedom of Information Act. So it's they had to say, well, yeah, if someone did it, we would invoke it.
And you think it should be a separate point?
I don't know. I'm just not sure it fits in number 2, but maybe it's the best place to put it. I'm not sure. I don't know what other people think about that. It just seems odd. It's like we're so specific about all this different stuff, and then all of a sudden maybe where it would go, actually, I'm sorry, where it could go is after all of the list in number 1, put that in as text all the way back to the margin in number 1.
Can we move it there, Leanne, and see how that looks? There you go.
There.
Put it to the margin. Don't have an indent at all.
I'm not sure it's going to let me do that with track changes on.
We can fix that. That's
right. But it seems like it's a global. It seems more like it's a global thing than it is a specific thing. And so the global thing is really number 1.
I think that works there. Any objections?
You'll have to fix the margin
after the word invoke.
We can fix the margin, not a problem.
Yeah, put a comma after the word invoke, because otherwise protected by law means, I think it's a completely separate thought than the Freedom of Information Act exemption. Could be Privacy Act or something else. We don't know.
Okay. All right, let's go to 3.
This is Russell.
Yeah.
I know Leanne has the question in the margin about templates. That led me to wonder if we don't use the word template everywhere, and I think that's a good idea. Not to, but the line that says one possible method of presenting this information with one model disclosure. There's a big difference between a possible method and a model disclosure, and I think her sense is, I don't want to speak for Leanne, obviously, but I think her sense is we don't get too far in in prescribing things. So I would just change model disclosure to example or something like that. I think what we're trying to do is say there's a variety of ways you can do this to get you started. Here's a possible suggestion, and stay away from ideas like model disclosure and not call them templates, which we don't, but since that word is floating around. I mean, I think her point in the marginal comment, I think is very well taken though.
Leanne, did you have any thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
I think that's fine. I definitely want to be consistent with the language. We had been internally referring to it as a template, but
Yeah.
I can totally see that we don't want to use that language in the recommendation itself.
Okay. Should we tackle now this idea of the template for AJs, or do we, why don't we hold that and let's go to 4 if there's nothing else on 3?
I do have a comment on that, on what we're skipping, so.
Okay. Anything on 4?
This is Jeff again. I don't like using link as a verb, so provide a link. Should provide a link to the web page.
Yeah.
It's twice in that, the next sentence too.
On another rather small note, when we say in the introduction to 4, the first word is when, it sort of implies that there's going to be times when the agency is doing A, and then if so, it should do B. I would still put the word if for when.
Okay. Yeah.
And then also down, 2 lines down, if conducting it is merely 1.
Also, the word persons, can we say either viewers or readers?
User?
Users, viewers.
That's
I
good.
think yeah, user.
That's good.
That sentence is long also. You could put a period after location and say something like one example of a, one example language rather than just have that sentence run on and on and on.
One example is Anne.
Something like that.
Yeah. No, Leanne, I think you're right.
So I'd like to make a comment about Appendix B whenever that's appropriate.
Yeah.
I
think we're done.
Okay. So
Are we
this
done
might
with 4? Any other further comments on 4? Okay.
Well, this relates to the last sentence of 4, but so I don't know if this is popular, but I just don't much like including Appendix B. I think that the websites that we have, while they are models in some sense, they don't really come close to covering all the issues that we suggest. And they're also, I think, difficult to reproduce in future iterations of this recommendation. Finally, they're subject to change. So at most, I would suggest putting the link, and if we can, a permalink in a footnote of either the preamble or put it at the end of Appendix A. I think it's too much clutter for one of our recommendations. And how is it going to be reproduced as a color photograph in the Federal Register? And it's also a lot skimpier than what we're suggesting. So I really don't see the benefit of including it. Or I say the costs are greater than the benefits of including.
It's there. It was not there before.
One thing I throw out is that we have done something that looks like this before.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I was just going to say that we have done something like this before. So I think there is some precedent for however we deal with it in the Federal Register. I'm not sure if it's full color prints, but we've done it at some point.
Sean, Sean, we definitely have done this. Can you speak to this?
Sure, we have done something like this before, in which case we did provide the graphic as part of the recommendation that's posted on our website, but we provided a link in the Federal Register notice, a link to our website. So that's how it was handled in the past. The Federal Register can't really do this type of presentation. They don't publish anything in color. And there's some complicated process for getting an in-camera presentation to even do a black and white photograph. So no, the picture would not go in the Federal Register notice, but a link to our website would.
So that's one concern, but I have a slightly more fundamental concern is I don't think the models necessarily are that good, because agencies should strive to do even more, we're saying, than these agencies. I mean, these agencies may be the best of the current crop, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it's that great of a model to me.
I guess I would just say, I mean, I think it's helpful for agencies to see that there's at least some information out there, and they could be more robust, clearly, which is why we have the recommendation.
We should cite it. I think we should cite these pages, but reproducing them, does it really warrant? Are they that good that they should be reproduced in our recommendations?
So can I flag one thing, which is that the reason that in the last committee meeting it was requested that we include these is because there was a concern that the language we used in the recommendation was insufficiently clear about how easy to find these pages should be. And so these are included less for the substance of what's on the page and more for the visibility of, oh, I can click 2 things and I'm there, or I can see this on the home page. Maybe different images would be useful to indicate that, so it doesn't look like we're saying the substance is ideal. But that was the point of Appendix B, is not to tout these as perfect examples of the substance included, but to suggest that there are ways to make them findable.
How can we know how many clicks it took to get to this
That's
point?
what so the text that I've included above the images is designed to talk about that a little bit. Most of them say whether there's a link placed on the home page and which homepage there is, and we tried to include one. So the Department of Labor, obviously, Office of Administrative Law Judges is a sort of sub-agency, and so it's linked from that homepage. But we had, the last one is the FLRA, and they link to it straight from their main page because their primary job is adjudication. And so that was the difference we were trying to illustrate here.
Maybe we can preserve your language, which is helpful. I mean, that does, I think that's pretty clear. I mean, I like your explanatory language, but I just don't think we need to reproduce the whole thing here, especially since the substance of it isn't exactly what we're looking for. So I like your explanatory intros to these things, and I think we should preserve those, maybe by putting them at the end of Appendix A or something like that. But that's just me, so I don't know how everybody else feels.
Any other thoughts? I mean, I do think it's helpful for agencies to see examples, but I guess what I hear you saying, Jeff, is maybe it's counterproductive because it's suggesting that this isn't, I mean, because it's not a full representation of what the recommendation is asking agencies to consider doing.
And
any
it's
other
fine
thoughts on?
if we want to single them out. Let's use the language that introduces them with a citation.
So Appendix B could be a list. We have how many did we include? I'm looking at the hard copy. Maybe Appendix B is just a list of examples, you know, not the actual pages themselves, but a list of agencies where you could look to see.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Basically just keep the language that's already there, but provide a link to the web page or a citation rather than an image.
Right.
And if you can get a permalink, because these links disappear all the time.
I'm not sure what ACUS's policy on permalinks is.
ACUS's policy, ACUS does not take material like this off its website. If you're worried about what's going to happen 60 years from now, I can't speak to that, but
No.
I would say for the foreseeable future, like project 5-10 years out, I wouldn't worry about it.
I'm
I
not
think the
worried about,
concern is that the other web
But-
pages will
yeah,
disappear,
I'm worried
not
about
ours.
what's on the
Oh, all
DLLs.
right. Well, I see. I'm sorry.
I think we can sort that out, though. I mean, behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I think I hear what Jeff is saying, that, you know, maybe the message here is about how easy it is to make it prominent, and we can do that without reproducing the pages.
And I think we have had some permalinks in previous recommendations. I recall seeing some.
Okay.
This is
Actually,
Ken.
they're
I don't know if I'm, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I take Jeff's point. It actually makes a lot of sense to me. It's really more about how you're going to kind of click through to find something. And the one thing I wondered is, I don't know if you all have this at your organizations, but we routinely get things from our IT department that essentially they're all just screenshots where they've circled, click on this, then you click on this. I was wondering, could you create something like that for 2 or 3 of these examples where they're really what it's linking to is ACUS's page that shows you click on this, and it's a 2-step process, and ta-da, there you are. And that way you'd have pictures of each of these websites, but it's not highlighting the substance, it's highlighting the process.
I could probably
That's-
figure out how to do that.
Yeah, you might need some tech support for that, and don't look here for that, because I get what you're saying, Ken. It sounds great. How we do it, I have no clue.
Yeah, I can't help there either. It always looks really pretty when it comes to me, though.
I think for most of these, the only thing I'd point out is that for most of these, we chose them because they're really easy to find. And that means there's like 2 pictures. It's a 1-step process. You click on one thing.
Okay.
But I can still show location on home page and then what that page looks like.
Okay. So let's get to, we'll have to wordsmith then, I guess, the last line of 4, recommendation 4, which is kind of where we started with this, to make clear what Appendix B really is. So I don't know if you want to put a comment there, Leanne, for you all to just, we'll remember.
Citations to agency websites. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just to clarify, is the committee preference, because I feel like there was both the suggestion of links and the suggestion of the step-by-step pictures. Do you want both, or do you want one or the other?
I was suggesting both. I would keep your descriptions. I think they're pretty good. But I think you could just say citations to agency websites at the beginning of this sentence, and then create Appendix B the way we've just been discussing it.
Okay. So I think the last issue we need to resolve is Appendix A. And there's 2 things to consider here. And we'll start with the big one because maybe we can get it resolved. Whether or not we include a separate example of disclosure for AJs. I think the thinking here is that there's so many variables that it's difficult to capture all of it, and agencies were going to have to really adapt it in a way that may make this template that we've been calling it really not that helpful.
Oh, can I also ask, this is where we use the word template. Should I also plan to change that per the earlier discussion?
I said, this is Russell, since I made the suggestion, I would say yes. And I think it goes partly to Nadine's concern. If we call it a template, template, then we're suggesting that you should be able to shoehorn all your things into this model framework. If we call it one approach, we're not claiming to do it much more than just saying, here's one way to do it, but it may not, one size is not going to fit all. Then the question becomes, is it really that helpful? I tend to think it is, but I think we ought to shy away from, as I indicated earlier, and as Leanne's side note, I think said as well, from suggesting that this is somehow the preferred model. This is just one approach, and we can fashion language to say that. Given the great variation among these agencies, we can't provide a template, but we can say here's one example, and give agencies a little bit of a head start rather than just starting from scratch. We're basically saying here are the kind of elements you want to consider including.
How about sample?
Sample instead of example? Okay. Can I just get some feedback? I'm hearing from Russell that having an AJ sample is helpful.
Yes.
Well, Kai Feldman wrote in too.
We'll get to that in a minute. Any other thoughts on helpful, not helpful? And then we do have a comment from somebody who is a member of the committee who's not here, or at least I don't think she is. I'm looking on my list. She thought she might be.
Bill Funk's raising.
Is she able to make it?
I don't think she's coming.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Bill.
I strongly support including the example here. I go along with Chai Feldblum's suggestion and what he wrote in. So I say keep it. I have a specific comment on one particular portion of it, but on the general issue, I think it should stay in.
This is Anika.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I mean, I agree. I think that because this recommendation is for both agencies that have ALJs and those that do not, I think having something specific in here for agencies that don't have ALJs but have a ton of AJs, or maybe even reading this recommendation will realize for the first time that they do have something that could be considered an AJ. I think having something particular for them is going to be helpful and is going to get probably more buy-in.
Okay.
What does Kent think? He's our expert on AJs.
No, at the last meeting, I was a little more on the fence about it, but after reading, the comment that we got earlier and thinking about it a little more, yeah, I'm pretty supportive of including it too. I just think it's easier implementation. I think maybe we can talk about this more. You may want to include just some language kind of highlighting why it's difficult to have a sample for this one because of the variability in it and just kind of alerting agencies to that. But to me, something at least they can pick up and, like we all do if drafting a document, have something to start with and then kind of play around with it. I think that's just much more likely to be used.
Okay. It sounds to me like everybody's interested in keeping it. So let's go back up to ALJ sample. And I know there was some language suggested by Judge Manuel, and any thoughts on that, or do you want to speak to that, Judge? I think we talked about it last time and you explained.
Yeah, I think we covered a fair amount of this, and it is referred to in different aspects of the document. So I agree with all the comments that are made that anything that can be an example or helpful to people, it's not every agency that has something on their website covering these issues. So it would be helpful as a starting point. And some may just get some ideas from some of the points that are already covered here throughout the document. But this sample could also be helpful in that regard. The language I had suggested was, for instance, fair and equitable. I'm not sure I fully understand the very good concerns that Matt raises, and I'm sure there are very good reasons for him having those concerns. But I just don't see why any agency would not want to have on their website that they provide fair and impartial hearings. I imagine that all agencies aspire to that. Having said that, I did go back and check, and I looked at the ODAR website, for instance. And although they allude to impartial judges, it's not quite the language that, for instance, our agency has, where we're actually not a commission. We're sort of a line agency, HUD. And we specifically state that our judges are independent ALJs and AJs alike. And it varies from one agency to the next. But I would imagine, again, I'm sure there are policy reasons for that where we may not want to say this, but I would imagine that most agencies would aspire to that and would be sort of proud of that and would want to have their litigants feel that they're having a fair process when they get a judge from their agency. So, and I see that that language is pretty much covered in here, neutral forum to resolve cases in a fair, transparent, and accessible manner. I think that's good language. But I think also the term procedural due process is important to have in there because that's something that all are guaranteed, whether they're familiar with the concept or not. And then the two other areas that we found that it's helpful to let our litigants know about that many of them just don't know, and it causes issues to be recurrent throughout our cases. And one is sort of reconsideration, you know, or to reopen a case. And so to let people know that they have that option, we found has been helpful. And the other thing, finally, is just the sort of appeal rights. And if they don't like the decision, who can they appeal to, which of course is different with ALJs because, you know, ALJs, it almost always is appealed to the agency head. But with, for instance, virtually all of my cases are final agency decisions and are appealed to the federal court. So it caused some confusion about where the next appeal step would be.
Yeah, I do think, I see Leanne's highlighted the language at the bottom here at 150, 152, 151, 152, that includes the appeal language. I think that probably opens the door for that.
We could also include the word reconsideration. I think that's the piece that's currently missing if we want to incorporate that in this section down at the bottom.
And should agencies provide a link to in terms of the appeal?
That's also the line right after that.
Okay.
Visit link for information on
I see that. Yeah.
May I say one thing? Go ahead.
Go ahead, Russell.
I was just going to say, I think Judge Manuel's language is very good. It covers most of the things that are here. There, it just compresses them, and we may want to break it out so that the various pieces go in the right place. There's a big difference, though, it seems to me, in his first sentence and the first sentence of paragraph 2. He says the department is committed to ensuring. The text as written says basically that it does ensure, and I think his language is much better. It's the same point as I made on page 1. It's one thing to say that we're committed to or we have policies to ensure. It's another just to make a flat empirical statement that you know, every agency is does things in a fair, transparent, and accessible manner. I agree, most of them do, but it's much better to say we seek to do that than just sort of it's a bragging statement to say we do it, as opposed to we're committed to doing it. So, I mean, I really like his language, and I think the various parts of it can be interspersed into the text as it's written. The only other comment I have, and it's really a question, do we want to say since we make reference to disciplinary procedures, we want to say if it's true that there are various ways to appeal your decision. The way to appeal it is not by filing a disciplinary complaint. Again, my federal court experience, a lot of people use the disappointed litigants use the complaint procedure as a kind of a second backdoor collateral attack.
Well, I guess the idea is, so would we include, I can't see the language on the screen. There we go. The first sentence, the first two sentences in the second paragraph.
Doesn't the first sentence raise the same issue that Matt raised earlier?
I mean, I'm personally less concerned about it. I don't have the same concern in this context that I did in the preambular sentence at the beginning, the framing sentence, especially if this is not being characterized as a template. I mean, I guess that's up to the committee. I'm having a little trouble seeing. The one thing I would say might be problematic, and I don't know if it's actually in the text on the screen because I'm having trouble seeing it. But Alex mentioned the word that adjudicators are independent, and there are no agency management officials on this call, but some of them are not going to like that phrasing at the plenary session, and that's why ACUS almost never uses that word. I don't know if it's in there, but Alex mentioned it. I don't know if that.
It's not.
Okay. Okay.
Equitable manner, there's an impartial administrative law judge. Impartiality and equitable is there, but independent is not.
The second sentence needs a little bit of work, it seems to me, because it says petitioners are entitled to procedural due process as determined by the impartial adjudicator. Well, it's not that the judge is determining procedural due process. Procedural due process is
Period.
what they're entitled to.
Period.
Period. And it's, so, you know, you don't get different due process from one judge from another judge. So that sentence seems.
Well, some litigants might beg to differ, but I'm sorry.
Well, I think, you know, obviously this is a sample and the agencies are going to use this in a way that they see fit. And so this is one way they can do this. If they want to expand on it, they can. I don't know if we want to say the department or we just want to put agency name. Yeah, I'm not sure what department.
Oh, and not the.
Well, what if we said petitioners are entitled to a due process hearing as presided over by an impartial administrative law judge or adjudicator? Because they're not determining due process per se, they're determining the substantive decision.
Can I suggest parties instead of petitioners?
Yeah.
I would take out the word as.
Parties are entitled to procedural due process, to a due process hearing presided over by an impartial administrative law judge. Something like that.
Okay.
Alex,
Do
is
we
that okay?
Leanne, was that you?
I was just going to say the only thing I want to flag is that this feels a little redundant with the two next sentences, and that's fine to take out the next two sentences, but there are blanks in there that we want to make sure we get in, right? The kinds of cases these ALJs hear, who appoints the agency official, and what qualifications they need to have were all included in those two sentences, and they're not currently in the first two we've just drafted, so.
Could you move highly trained into the same clause as by an impartial, comma, highly trained ALJ? And then the next sentence, well, they're I guess two sentences down, our ALJs are appointed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And should we take out then also ALJs just resolve cases involving, take out the provide a neutral forum since we covered that earlier?
Yes.
Are ALJs generally highly trained, or, I mean?
They are, well, they are at my agency. Judge Manuel, you have something to say about that?
Yes,
all ALJs until the recent executive order basically have all gone through an extensive OPM sort of assessment process. And
I'm aware of that, but the question is, once a new ALJ, especially under the new executive order, I don't think is necessarily highly trained. I mean, hopefully they're highly qualified, but why not say qualified rather than trained? Or even just say.
I don't think there's much formal training going on now for new ALJs.
Well, for new ones, that's right. I would say for the vast majority of ALJs, they not only went through that process, they would be hired, and there was a period of observation, et cetera. So they tend to be pretty qualified, I would say. But yeah, I think qualified suits the bill.
Impartial qualified ALJ.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Nadine, may I just jump in here by way of defending the president? I think this is good the way this is. I don't think that anything has changed with respect to training as a result of the executive order, whatever the merits of the executive order. And there are indeed any number of agencies, the Social Security Administration being one of them, that really does extensively train ALJs, right, Jeremy, prior to their actually hearing a case. I mean, they hang out in a hotel for like 5 weeks. Anyway,
Yep,
that's a footnote.
And I think that language was actually taken from the DOL's Office of ALJ's website. So I don't know if it's universally acceptable, but that did come from an actual website, I believe.
Well, I think we have good language here to work with. And Judge Emanuel, I guess the idea is captured by your first 2 sentences at least, do you think are reflected here now?
Yes, definitely.
So
And then
one other concern in the next paragraph, whenever you're ready.
I was just going to go to the appeal piece of Judge Manuel's comment and just ensure that we're capturing that in the bottom part. Are you?
You want?
Judge Manuel, you said your cases go directly to the federal courts. Do they always go directly to the federal courts?
You're on mute. You're on mute. We can't hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, about 75% of my docket goes directly to the federal court on appeal. It rarely happens, but it does. And about 25% is appealed to the secretary as the ALJ cases are.
Yeah, I think that's pretty rare that the agency cases jump directly to the courts.
MSPB jumps to the courts. That's a lot of cases.
You mean if nobody appeals?
No, you don't have to exhaust any remedies beyond the AJ at the MSPB. You can go right to the federal circuit.
Maybe that's because there's no board there.
I can send you.
I think it's baked into the statute.
Yeah, I can send you, Jeff, our standard appeal line that we put at the bottom of every decision.
Okay, Judge Manuel, the language on 153, 154 on the screen now, I think as edited, Leanne just added in some language to capture some of the spirit of what you had in the last 2 lines of your comment.
Yeah, I think that looks good, except that with reconsideration, you say agency official. It really, in reconsideration, is almost always the judge who decided the case, but that's an agency official.
So maybe you should put, you can seek reconsideration from the judge, or you can appeal that decision.
To put that first,
if you were dissatisfied with an ALJ's decision, you can seek reconsideration from the judge.
Mm-hmm.
Is that always the case, or should that be in brackets?
You may.
Every reconsideration I've ever heard of was to the judge.
You may be able to request. I mean, some agencies might not have this.
Right. I think that is sort of a basic part of the whole idea of this. Is some agencies are just going to have to take some bits of this out.
Yeah. Okay.
do you want to put ALJ there instead of judge? Okay. I think we're good on the comment from Judge Emanuel. Okay.
Okay, so on line 142, I don't think we should put in that bracket that says list investigative enforcement components. I mean, it's enough just to say that they do not report to agents, officials, and investigative or enforcement components. I don't see why we should be trying to suggest to agencies that they have to come up with a long list of all their investigative and enforcement components. Just seems like overkill to me.
Could take it out. Okay, I think, Bill, did you have something else? Is it on the AJ one?
It's on the AJ one.
Okay, great. Let's wrap up ALJ. Anything further on ALJ? Keep in mind, this is a sample and agencies are going to adapt it any way they want. We're really just trying to capture some basic concepts and they can take, leave, use what they like. I think it reads well.
This is Russell. I just want to, I'm not going to belabor the point. Do we want to say anything? Where would it be on line 153, right in there, that there are methods for, what do we say, reporting misbehavior, but don't use that to appeal a decision? Or is that too specific and too in the weeds?
I think it might be too in the weeds. Okay.
Just raising the point.
Yep. Let's go to
another very minor thing.
Yeah, Russell.
Line, the C also says Congress's rules governing ALJs, rules and statutes. That all gets mixed up. For the AJ one, we say Congress's provisions. Can't we just say Congress's provisions here as well?
Sure.
And can we add an EG before the executive order?
I guess what I was thinking there is that if there are other executive orders, I would almost rather put a bracket and add other pertinent EOs. Do you know what I mean? Because they should be listing all of them. And if we put EG, that may suggest that they only need to put a representative list of executive orders that pertain.
Okay.
Would it be better to say statutory provisions rather than Congress's provisions?
I just thought for some people statute was a little bit of an esoteric word.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think Congress made, what is a Congress provision? You know, people know what a statute is. How about legal provisions?
No, they confuse it with statutes, Bill.
How about laws? Yeah. Laws governing.
Well, what's wrong with statutes? It's a very commonly used word. Yes, statutory provisions. We use it all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well,
and
can
we
I
use
ask a question?
Yeah.
Are you a user of the website?
Never mind. I'm good. We're good. That's good.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, there might be some other regulations governing, like MSPB might have some regulations, right? I mean, are there any other regulations besides OPMs?
Governing ALJs?
You mentioned MSPB, Jeff. Well, they for sure have that in the disciplinary proceedings before MSPB requires the appointment of an ALJ to hear those cases.
Right.
And the MSPB has different procedural rules governing ALJ removal cases, or disciplinary cases. That's a good point.
So just say regulations and not specify an agency?
Well,
or should it be
regulations are listed there, but maybe it needs to be a separate bullet point. You know, other agency regulations governing ALJs and just not list any.
Yeah.
Just put it in brackets?
No.
No. Yeah, right, because there may not be any. Brackets are when we're going to fill it in, right? Yeah.
Oh, that's a little ambiguous because we're talking about this is one agency's model rule. And so is it referring to that agency's regulations or
this agency's regulations?
This agency's regulations, yeah.
This agency's regulations.
But then that leaves up MSPB.
Right.
Yeah, I thought this part of the, this was dealing with sort of government-wide things, and that everything above that was related to what this particular agency does.
How about
I agree.
additional agency regulations? Instead of other, additional agency regulations.
Or you could say civil service regulations, and e.g. OPM, MSPB.
Didn't we decide to change the word Congress in the first one, or did we decide to leave it in?
Did we? Okay,
Let's make
sorry.
it statutory. I think because the ones that are listed there are OPM regulations, right, Leanne?
Yeah, the ones listed there are just OPM.
So we've got that covered, and then additional agency to the extent, all of this is about disclosing as much information as possible, or as much as information as the agency is willing to. I think this covers the idea that we want them to kind of think about beyond just OPM.
How about the MOUs? A lot of the agencies have MOUs running between them regarding the use of ALJs from other agencies. Essentially the ALJ loaner program.
While you're thinking about that, you got to take the brackets off of the additional agency regulations, because you're always going to have the MSPB regulations that would be applicable. So
Would it be useful to have a separate bullet point that is MSPB's regulations governing ALJs and list them out, and then have additional agency regulations in brackets?
Are there
think
any?
so.
What are they?
I mean, like the memorandums of understanding that Judge Manuel was just talking about, I guess they wouldn't necessarily be regulations, but
They
I think we need a catch-all to say literally anything else you think matters to this that we're not exhaustively listing.
So additional legal provisions. Additional legal provisions governing ALJs.
Well, you sort of look at the APA in a way, but other statutes as well, sort of enabling statutes. And the point was raised earlier about the authority. How does the ALJ have authority and that sort of thing? And the MOU basically does that. It borrows from other statutory authority, in particular the OPM loaner regs. And it basically sets out the terms by which the ALJ presides over cases for that agency, although the ALJ is from another agency.
Well,
So
that would
MOU
be something agency specific, right? So these are intended to be broader. An agency specific MOU might come above the C also, but
yes.
And it might fit under how cases are assigned, to the extent that you're talking about loaner judges. I mean, I think we can be broad here. I think the more granular we get, the harder it is to kind of think of every possibility.
So Leanne, the OPM regulations you cited, are those the ones that they're out for comment now?
That's an excellent question.
You might want to double check those citations.
Yeah. Well, I think they have a proposed rule out now, right? But these are only the ones that have been finalized. So I think I put this together with what is currently authoritative, and agencies are again going to need to adapt as continuing things evolve.
Absolutely.
We're going to keep an eye on that for adjusting it. Well, it probably won't happen before the plenary session though, so.
No.
Try to make your best guess.
Shall we move to the AJ template? I mean, to the extent that we've made edits to the ALJ template that impact the AJ template, I should not sample, sorry. Can we trust Leanne to make conforming edits so that things are consistent between the two? So we don't have to like spend time doing that now. I think we can. Leanne, can you handle that?
I think so.
Okay. So for instance, that part.
Yeah.
I think And are there any comments on the AJ? I know Bill had something, I think, on the AJ. We've been talking about that, so I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, it's now currently under, let's see, the second paragraph.
Okay.
And where is it? Appointed by, it's where it says, I'm going back to my idea of flagging the authority for appointment. And it's 185 now. It says appointed by agency official. And I would say appointed and then insert under and then bracket statute authorizing appointment, end bracket. No, before by. Appointed under.
Pursuant, is that too?
Pursuant is fine too.
Not plain language?
Whatever. Pursuant to and then bracket. Statute authorizing appointment. And bracket.
You could just say authorizing statute. I mean, it's clear that we're talking about appointment there.
I also want to flag, I believe that the next sentence is a mistake. We meant to take this out, and I did not do that before sending it out. So
take it out now. No worries. It's
you're
out.
You're going to change highly trained in this one too?
Yeah, everything I'll do the ordering correctly with how we did it in the other one.
We'll make it consistent. Any other points on the AJ sample?
I would like it if on the C also, the very end, the where we have, again, Leanne will get this Congress's provision to be statutory provisions, but regarding, and I'd say adjudicators, plural, titles, plural, because the agency may have more than one type of AJ, and then after that, say after the bracket, comma, including their appointment.
Can I ask a broader question with the idea of adjudicator titles being plural? Do you think that this is a sample or the recommendation would want a separate page for each kind of adjudicator, or would the agency combine one page for multiple adjudicators?
Good question. One of the reasons I want it to be plural is that way I could refer to their appointment rather than his, her, their, its.
I think it's fine to leave it on one line, Leanne. I think you raise a good point, and an agency may realize on their own that they, I mean, so you would say here, are you thinking you would say here regarding each type of adjudicator? So the implication would be we want separate.
I guess I'm just thinking that everywhere else in these samples, we use the singular, so it feels weird to me to make this plural here. I think I should flag, I think I have not been making plural in the bracket where they would say like ALJs was easy to leave there. I think here we'd have, hearing officers.
Yeah,
but I haven't,
right
there's no good way to pluralize within the bracket.
Yeah, you're right. Take out the adjudicators, plural, adjudicators titles, and then including the
Appointment
adjudicators.
authority. Yeah, take out titles. Yeah, there. Appointment authority.
Great, including appointment authority. Great.
And it would be the, not there.
Right. Terrific. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
How about at the top of the whole sample where it says about our insert adjudicator title? Would that be a place where you'd want to say you may want separate page for different adjudicators or something? Some little note about that. Would that That'd be a good
Would
place
it
to
be
do
better
it.
there or in the actual recommendation itself?
I think here would be fine. We wouldn't have to do it for ALJs because there's only one type of ALJ, but
Is it, yeah, I guess it doesn't hurt to be explicit there. I mean, it should be yeah. Or were you thinking, Jeff, that it would specify, a separate?
I mean, maybe it's kind of an asterisk point, may need separate website for separate text, separate document for
Each type.
each type of AJ the agency uses or something like that.
How would you, should it maybe under where it says sample website text, we do something in italics that says?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just flag the issue.
They have. Or just each kind of adjudicator?
I think you ought to start that by saying if agencies have different kinds of adjudicators, they should consider providing separate web pages.
For each, yeah. Yeah, that's good.
This is Ken. I'm not adding text to it, but just to support the point, I think it is important to have this not only because the substance might change for each adjudicator, but the placement might also change too. If I've got an appellate group, I'd want the web page in a different spot.
Sure. I think that's good. Any other thoughts on the AJ sample? Great. I think we're done, Leanne. Am I missing anything?
I don't think so. I just need to make the second sample match the first one.
Yeah.
It's 4:01, Nadine.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. It's going to be cocktail time soon enough. So, so at this point, I think I can call for a vote, and only ACUS members of the committee, only members of the committee, being redundant here, it's late, may vote to on the recommendation. So perhaps the best way to do this, I'm trying to see how many people we have left, is, yeah, if it's got to be, if there is any objection, let's hear the no's first.
Nadine, this is Kent. Just before you begin, I just wanted to make it clear, since this is being recorded, although I'm a member of the committee, I'm recusing myself on this because I'm acting as a consultant.
Excellent. Thank you, Kent. That's great. I'm not hearing any no's. So it would be good if everybody could put their mics on, and whoever wants to say yes from the membership, please say yes.
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 I think we got it. What else do we need, Leanne? Jeremy,
I
anybody?
think that's it. Other than
Tell us about the next meeting. Tell us about the next meetings.
Yes.
Excellent.
So
Yeah, we can
say
do
thank
that.
you everyone for showing up to 2 meetings in such short order. But guess what? We have a third one.
And
It
a fourth
is
one if we get that far.
and a fourth one. The next one is a week from today. It is at this same time slot, 2 to 5, but it's on the other project that Gavin is the person in charge of.
Is Gavin still here?
Agency Appellate Systems is the name of the project, with
you.
a report by Professor Chris Walker and Matt Weiner.
Excellent.
And more details about that will be circulated this coming week.
And the following meeting after that is when?
Ooh, the 23rd, maybe?
It's the Monday, it's the second Monday following next Friday, which would be.
Yes, it is the 23rd.
Yes. The Monday before Thanksgiving.
And that's noon to 3 that day.
Ooh, can't you?
Eastern time.
That's not good for me, but that's okay. I teach too.
It's the second meeting. We'll get it all done in the first. What do you say, Jeff?
Okay.
Did you say that the meeting next week is at the same time? I had it down as an hour earlier.
Gavin, I think it's at 2 to 5 Eastern.
That's what I have.
Okay, good.
Great. Excellent. Plenty of time to unwind and begin your weekend. Thank you all.
Nadine, may I just thank you for another excellent recommendation. I don't know if this is 7, 8, or 9 or whatever it is, but characteristically well done. I think this one turned out extremely well, and I hope Kent is happy. He's been vindicated a little bit here, right? It's actually an implementation of it's kind of a direct implementation of one of your articles. So that's exciting, isn't it?
It is. Thank you all.
So thank you. And I just want to be clear. I was not intending to I didn't mean to put a thumb on the scale before. I'm just trying to protect the committee, ensure that its work at the end of the day survives the council and then the assembly. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you for that, Matt. We want it to get through. Kent and I've been there. We've been there when it doesn't. So we want things to go through. Absolutely.
And I got to sit in, and along with Sean, I have to sit in the council room and get these things on the agenda. So it's important.
And Matt, I suggest you ask Jack to codify his grammatical style points for the conference.
Wait, what did you say, Jeff?
Jack should codify his style suggestions as to only and or. This comes up in every recommendation.
Jack, we have a piece of internal administrative law. We do have a style manual the staff uses. Maybe we should make it public. I actually think it's pretty good. But
yeah, I don't know about whether the proper placement of only and the proper use of and or.
No, that may not
really tackle in a general rule.
No, the only placement probably not. We may already have a rule on and or, which is not to use it. And generally, when you mean you mean or.
The choice between, like, I'll give you an example. There's an advertisement on WBOR radio where they say Geico Insurance providing coverage for cars, trucks, or SUVs. And I always want to throttle the person and say, I think they give coverage for cars, trucks, and SUVs. That's the best example. Anyway, it's something about my personality that makes me get so crazy about it, not about them actually what they're doing. But I have to go give a talk. I have to give a retrospective on the election now, which was planned a long time ago. So I'm gonna have to leave. But
I thought you were going to perform a rock concert now, Jack.
No. That's not till much later.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
See you all. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
And Matt, I think you should make that style sheet public.
I think
we should. You're right. We should. You can FOIA it. Jeff, you can FOIA it. If 3 people FOIA it, Sean, then we have to put it up, right?
Put it up. Follow your own recommendation.
No, we'll put it up. We'll put it up.
Thank you,
All
Leanne. I thank you, Leanne, for helping us along here and getting us through to the end. Greatly
Thanks,
appreciate
everyone.
it.
Thanks, Judge Manuel.
First project, I love it. Good job. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Good to see everyone.